know the voucher has gone around. I saw it today. What's that? Oh, thank you. Hopefully people you are all signing that. Is there a motion for approval of minutes of 12 February 2024?
Public comment.
Oh, public comment, sorry. Is there any public comment?
Good catch.
Sorry if there's public, I want to hear from you. I'm just sipping on through here. Sorry. Is there a motion for approval of minutes?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. That brings us to reports and updates, the superintendent's report. And I know Mike is going to give a little review for us board members on like some of the rules around voting and abstaining, and because that has come up and so that will be included in the superintendent report, a little refresher for us.
So good evening, everybody. I want to start by sort of sharing that over my 2.5 years as superintendent, one of the things that has always plagued me is at all of our individual board meetings, principals have always been asked to make sure that they have a written and ready principal's report to share. And my years as a principal, superintendent never really had, they shared their important points and would move on. And but I wanted to make sure that the information that I shared was out there and available for folks to see. So I created a template that I will be using going forward that will be attached to our agenda in minutes that sort of describes some of the things that are going on here in the school system, and then is accessible to community afterwards, is making sure that folks are aware of what we're doing as an AOS. You know, to honor the work that principals do, that there's no reason why I shouldn't be doing the same thing. So, superintendent's report for March is the first go around, and I wanted to share our district service promise, and this is something I share at every one of our 18 meetings because it helps ground the work that we're doing, and that is interrupting educational inequities and creating schools where every child and staff member thrives one conversation at a time. Our enrollment has grown +8, and when Selena and I were talking this morning, she was like, it was like all over the place. There's elementary school here, high school there, and so that continued sort of fluctuation up and down in our population. But we've gone up. It was 1411 last in February. Staffing update. In general, I will probably report just sort of the general. I won't be school specific because there'll be the link that you see there goes right directly to the website. So when this is on as minutes or in the agenda, if anybody is sort of looking through my report, they'll be able to see specifically what schools. But we have a couple elementary teacher positions, we have a nurse position, special ed teacher positions in speech and language, and then support staff. We have ed techs, bus drivers, and coaches. And linked here, and so every month in my report will be the link to our employment opportunities if someone was to come across us. One of the things that we are doing this year is we have gone to the University of Maine Farmington Job Fair. Julie and Rhonda went, I believe it was last week, and they had 22 future teachers fill out our employment form, which was pretty basic. It had asked for their name, the area that they were teaching, I think that was about it, and their contact information, so we can email them, and we've already done that on some of our positions. As soon as if we have an opening, then we will shoot out information to these folks. So it's a pretty simple form, but it has already produced some benefit in terms of getting information out to job seekers. And we'll have the same thing. They're going to be up at the UMO Job Fair, which is coming up in April. And so look forward to hopefully maybe getting some good candidates through that process. So thank you. School highlights, I like to sort of share. You know, we are a school system that sends all of our kids, the majority of our kids, to MDI High School. So I think it's really good for all of us to hear what our kids are doing. And so at the high school, I saw some public service announcements that were made for students as part of a restorative justice piece, and they went out to the middle schools in terms of what you should and shouldn't do in terms of social media as a way of identifying the things that you have to be careful of. So that was kind of cool to see that. I did want to share that the MDI boys swim and the girls swim, they both placed third at states, and the boys got the sportsmanship award. The boys and girls basketball teams, that happened in between our two meetings, and they were just fun to watch. And it was amazing just to see how tenacious the girls were and how close they were at winning that game. That was closer than I think what people thought, and it was just fun to watch. And the boys did an amazing job as well at the tournament, and it's just fun to see all those people there watching those games. We had the drama festival, and our school performers got runners up. And track, we had Miles Burr was first in the 55-yard dash and 400-meter. Olivia Pratt was second in the shot put. So that's two Trenton folks who were killing it at states. And then Amelia Van Dogen was first in the 800-meter. At the Ashley Bryan School over on Cranberry, they did a ski trip to Black Mountain. They went to visit the Maine Mineral and Gem Museum, which I've heard from a variety of people is awesome. And I haven't been there yet, but the folks that have gone there said it's amazing. You can hold pieces of the moon and other really cool things, a great educational opportunity. It's over in Bethel. Their bird of the week is going strong, and so if you go there, the American goldfinch was last week. And they held their kids cafe where they serve coffee and muffins and stuff to the community as a sort of a fundraiser. At Frenchboro, every Wednesday, as I have shared, they come off. The older students join the tech class with Mr. B, and the younger kids join PE class while they're there, and then they do some of their own independent work, and they are preparing as a whole school for the spring play that happens happening at Schoodic for their TLC with the other island schools. So they meet there in the spring. It's a big field trip, and they'll be performing a play there. At Connors Emerson, middle schoolers went over to Willowwind Farm and working with horses. They have their ropes and mats, not wrapped up PE, and that is, if you were ever to go into Connors Emerson around this time of year, you'd see the big cargo net and ropes dangling everywhere and kids swinging and climbing, hopefully not falling. But just a great opportunity. I loved climbing the rope as an elementary school student. It was lots of fun. There was a bell at the top when you made it, and you could ring it. Sixth graders were working and completing their college essays. Kindergartners were out and about tapping trees for sap, and the show choir performed here at the show choir event that we had here at the high school. At Trenton, I had a chance to sit in and listen to 3 of the speeches for the 8th grade middle school speech contest, and the theme was overcoming challenges. And it was amazing to hear. I mean, just the 3 that I heard was very touching in terms of some of the challenges that our students overcome, and then they come to school every day. Unfortunately, I won't be able to go to Camp Beechcliff to hear the district one because I'll be at a board meeting, but if anybody has a chance to go over and listen, the speeches are quite amazing, and they work really hard on them. Pre-K at Trenton now, because of staffing, like we're all having issues, and we've put together a plan for the remainder of this year where the pre-K kids are going over to Avery Lane, which is the Down East Community Partners. It's right by the new YMCA center for their early childhood center, and it's we're collaborating and making sure all the kids get there. And it was to ensure proper staffing, and they were struggling with some staffing, but we really worked together to make sure that program can continue. The pep band at Trenton played at the staff versus student basketball game, and intramural floor hockey is underway, which is a pretty serious thing over there. At Pematic, they'll be preparing for their upcoming literacy night. And our own Kulani placed 18th out of 64 competitors at the Math Count State Meet, and she was the #1 ranked MDI competitor, so good for her. Some middle schoolers went to the Nimbus dance presentation that was held at the Criterion, and the kindergartners went over to did some community art in class, and then they went over and did some silk dancing at the Southwest Harbor Library. And libraries are not just for reading. On Swans Island, they had their last basketball game versus Lemoyne, and that was last week. And the funny thing is the former superintendent was their chaperone. So Rob Lebo went over with them. He's the superintendent there, but he was their chaperone, sent me pictures of the boat ride. February was American Heart Month, and students there focused on their personal fitness in PE. Students went to the Grand for a brand new performance called Black History's Groundbreaking Geniuses, and there were two individuals who were sort of taking on characters and talking about the African Americans' role in history from Maya Angelou on. And so from what I heard, they did an amazing job of just circulating around and being different characters. And the middle schoolers are getting serious about algebra and working on variables, expressions, and proportional relationships. At Mount Desert, the homework club is returning. Kayla Gagnon, who works with Down East Restorative Justice, has been working with the school as they work on their restorative justice practices, as that process is moving down into the middle schools. The Innovation Fair is coming. And student art was shown all through February, was in the Mellon Room at the Northeast Harbor Library. At Tremont Consolidated, grade 2 went ice fishing when there was still ice, and learned about invasive species. Grade 5 was doing tapping of trees and learning about the history and science of maple syruping. And the fishing derby didn't happen, but the raffle did, and the 8th graders earned about $6,000 towards their 8th grade class trip. And the TCS Drama Club is in full swing. So those are all of the exciting things that are going on in our area schools. And so it's really nice to be able to hear them when I'm at meetings or to see them when I'm visiting or read them in their newsletters. The other part of my report is just a sort of review of our budgets, sort of where we are. Right now, the two budgets that have been approved would be the AOS budget and Swans Island. And I have what their total budgets is, their increase, and the increase to assessment. Every budget in our district has gone through the school board approval process, except for Trenton and Frenchboro are the two that are behind. Everything that has been completed I put in bold. And then I've made sure that I stated the town meetings that are there. So this is there for you to get a sense of what all the budgets look like at our schools. Staff spotlight, Philippa Adam, who is our new art teacher here at the high school. She received the Maine Art Education Association Award and recognition round for new teachers, so that came out a couple of weeks ago, so congratulations to Philippa. I wanted to share that at College of the Atlantic, Linda Fuller was teaching a class called Teaching as an Act of Hope, and she had a variety of presenters from across the country, but she really anchored a lot of information from teachers here in the district. And so Heather Doherty from Connors Emerson, Hannah Mondruck here from the high school, Lynn Hanna, Connors Emerson, Alana Diaz here at the high school, Brian Cody from Connors Emerson, and Emily, who is the art teacher over at Pematic, were all folks who took part in that class and talked to students and answered questions about teaching as an act of hope. I was one of the last people for their last meeting on Friday, where they met with Jasmine, who runs the community school, and myself, and then Todd West, who was a graduate of COA and taught here at the high school, and then was principal at Bucksport, and is now working for the Rural Collaborative, I believe it is called.
Rural Aspirations.
Rural Aspirations, thank you, Julie. And so, it was a great time to sort of talk with students who are thinking about teaching, and to really sort of talk about that idea that it's about instilling hope. And so that was a great opportunity. I'm glad Linda reached out to area teachers to sort of talk about that and their experience. And then I wanted to share some retirements, and so I wanted to congratulate Carol Rosinski, the guidance counselor at Connors Emerson, as she's moving on. Wanda Fernald, nurse at Mount Desert. Gail Gray, a middle school teacher at Mount Desert, Sue Whippy, speech and language in Trenton, and Raylene Banks, who has been sort of the face of the Swans Island School in the office and ed tech for years, is retiring. And some general updates across the district. We have our March PD Day that's focusing on responsive classroom and restorative justice. At the high school, responsive classroom from the middle school and the elementary schools, are really excited about having those folks come here and give that training to all of our teachers. It's been a big thing for me ever since I was at Connors Emerson, something that really important skills that I think all teachers should have, particularly now as we look at supporting teachers in those early grades. Summer school registration has begun with over 100 registrants, so that's exciting. Some of our schools have received literacy grants and homeless support funding from the state. I think you have seen in the news about the electric buses. All of our buses have been inspected and have the green light to be functioning on the road, and things are going well with ours. The A team met with Camp Beechcliff, and we talked about sort of creating sort of ongoing and systematic programming with them, and talking about those after-school possibilities when we think about ideas and looking at early release time on a regular basis. So they were really excited about partnering, and we're going to be continuing to work with them on some areas since they are right here in our backyard, and it was a great opportunity to hear the programs that they have done. And just a reminder that the CDC rule changes have been implemented in all of our schools. There's no longer that requirement of the 5-day quarantine. Basically, you can return to work and school as long as you are symptom or fever-free for 24 hours without the use of medications. And so we'll see how that plays out in terms of overall student absences and teacher absences as we go forward in the last couple of months of school. I wanted to share a little bit about reorganization. Very exciting. I'll kind of start at the bottom, is that the RPC begins its work this Wednesday, 5:30 to 7. We have working with Kendra Rand, who's going to be the facilitator, and I sort of worked with her on Friday, was that Friday?
Friday.
On Friday, to build that first agenda for the entire group. So really looking forward to beginning that process. I've put on this slide, which will be there. Folks can go to the district website to see more information. The AOS reorganization tab is on the right to look at information of things that I have already shared and things that we'll be going over as a group. But I wanted to share sort of out loud to this group sort of the reminder of the why. And this paragraph comes from one of the first documents that we shared in moving forward with reorganization. And that is, it's AOS 91's effort to reorganize its current structure from a collection of individual schools into a coherent and more equitable model to better serve our students and educators. It makes sense to look at how we can provide the best education for everyone with our collective resources. The current organization creates separate and unequal budgets that lead to disparities in educational program and opportunities, and is redundant and costly to taxpayers. And so that is sort of the mission for our team, is to sort of keep that as we are thinking and moving forward. So I'm really looking forward to that process. I'm very excited that we are moving forward after years of talking. And so, yeah, as you can tell, I'm really excited to do this work. And it's going to be hard, but I hope we come out with something that folks will be able to vote on. And that in the end, the voters will have the last call on whatever sort of what we create. So looking forward to that work. I didn't know what to call this, and I'll probably put something in every month. So I called it the School Board Corner. If you have a better name for it, more than happy to put that out there, because people are going to be reading this outside of here. And so Jessica sort of talked about sort of voting, and I thought that would be sort of a good place to start. But really I wanted to start in thinking about the principles of successful school board service. And this comes out of the MDI School Board Handbook. And so it sort of points out that you are all selected by your fellow citizens to be a school board member, not simply to echo the views of those citizens, their views and their wants, but for your willingness to and ability to learn about and analyze complex issues, help the public understand those issues, work effectively as a team with fellow board members and use your best judgments in making decisions, and to vote on behalf of the best overall interests of the organization, students, and school. You are really policymakers. You're not legislators.
Right, we're policy, and I mean, people will all know because we all went through the same orientation, but it's always good, and I remind myself before every meeting that we serve the best interests of students in the building, not the best interests of the taxpayer or an administrator or a friend or whoever, or our own personal beliefs, but what we truly believe is in the best interest of the collective good of the students in the school.
And so in terms of voting, every member of a public body, including the chair, and there's been times when chairs have abstained and things like that, have a duty to express a choice or a preference by his or her vote. But they can legally abstain, so abstention can happen. And abstention is a non-expression and cannot be considered a vote in favor or against a motion. So that's important to know. And board members should abstain from voting only in situations where he or she has a direct or pecuniary or economic interest in the matter under consideration. And that information is from the school board handbook. And so it's really important to be able to converse about, when we're talking about, whether it's policy or other things where we need to have sort of those discussions and be able to share your point of view and then, vote in a manner that you think is in the best interest of the school. And that, might be a no vote or it could be a yes vote. But it's important to vote since you are, here in that capacity for the interests of the school and the interests for the students. And so, in future months, I'll add a little something, and you can suggest something that might be interesting for board members to hear as part of the AOS. And, a lot of boards do little sort of workshop-y pieces on how to be effective board members and what that can look like. And we could do little snippets like this in the school board corner, or insert better name.
I like it. I think
we gotta keep it.
It's good.
We
Yes.
love it.
I love it, and I think it's great. I mean, I think for the most part, we have very fruitful and effective decisions as a board. And it's good to remind us, the voting reminded me, that during the discussion phase, like let's say budgets or something like that, which or the calendar or one of these very contentious issues, that we're most effective when we bring when we bring our perspectives and our additions during that initial discussion phase. And then by the time it gets to the vote, we should be ready to say that we're either, we are either for it or we have good reasons and we're voting against it, but not abstaining as a sort of way of ducking the issue or expressing our displeasure without voting. No, ideally, we read our stuff before we get to the meetings and we're prepared to talk about the budget or prepared to talk about the calendar during that discussion phase and make our mark on it. I mean, we may not all always prevail on, like different people have different ideas about what's in the best interest of students, so we may sometimes not come to agreement, but hopefully we've had that discussion, and then when we get to the voting, we're either voting for it, or if we really feel like things have gone apart, then we might vote against it. But
one thing I didn't add in here, as I was reading some of the materials on school board participation and voting, there was a statement, and it might be in the handbook, where it says, be willing to put your stake in the ground, but also be willing to move it. And that's part of that idea, is we're trying to come up with the best decisions, which means sometimes you have to give a little bit. So, I thought that was interesting.
I have a question about, we don't ever ask if somebody's abstaining though. Like, unless, we know Selena doesn't miss anything, so maybe she is able to, so like what, do you know what I'm saying? Like, we
Well, I
don't
think if
ask,
you say-
some of us aren't voting, so we're not raising our hand, or we're
so
not.
we have the list. So once we do for and opposed, if there
That's
was
just by whoever
if
was supposed to be voting but didn't raise, but we're not saying like any abstentions, because we've never done that.
well, we've had some. It's been a long time. There wasn't an abstention issue when I first became the
Yeah.
AOS chair, and I recall that I had to ask someone not to abstain because they didn't have a pecuniary or
Okay.
whatever. interest, but it has come up in some local
Okay,
board meetings, so, I mean, I think it's always good to refresh, but yeah, really, we should be keeping track of if some of that, any abstentions. I'm not aware, since, other than the instances that I'm talking about, that has happened, but
I mean,
you're
neither,
right.
me neither, but I figured
Yeah.
if we're talking about it, there must be.
Yeah, we should
And, some,
pay
and,
attention.
sometimes folks do have abstain, but they'll say ahead of time, because like when we're voting on minutes, somebody
wasn't
will
at the
abstain
meeting.
because they weren't, and that's, reasonable,
That's
because you weren't
you
there.
shouldn't vote on it if you weren't at the.
Yeah.
Can you just note when there's new board members elected,
Mhm.
to have that part of the welcome package? Only because I had a situation like that where I abstained. It was in the height of COVID and it was a pretty contentious situation, and I got a lot of flack for it, which I appreciate, because I mean, I didn't know. I in the moment I didn't like either option, but I didn't know that abstaining isn't really an option.
Right.
And so, we all grow up together, right?
Yep.
Right,
Uh,
yeah.
So I just think it would be really, something, because our vote is really important. And I think that it should be something that's in the, this is part of being a school board person.
Right.
Yeah, I'll have to make sure, we do that with the Maine School Boards Association. I'll have to review some of those slides and make sure there's
Because I really did
explicit
not know
information
that,
about that.
and it was terrible to learn that
In the
in the way
public
that.
moment, and I think when I
You know,
also
it was-
had to ask someone not to abstain, it was the same situation where they just didn't know, so, yeah.
Well, and I don't think it was handled correctly for me, in the end I did abstain, but I shouldn't have been able to. But it was like out there on the floor, yeah, you can, or whatever, it just was very awkward.
Add that to the board orientation, so.
And so that's my,
I was just
Misha,
gonna add
sorry.
to that like one of the things that I was confused about in the beginning too is just about like abstaining direct interest, but like when it's about a teacher that's currently your kid's teacher, or we had leaves of absences came up,
Yeah.
and I was like, how are you supposed to handle that? But it's not an economic conflict, so having some examples of things that have come up for people like
Would
right
be
away,
good.
it seems to be
Right.
the same things over and over again.
well, hopefully the new contract, those don't come.
Turns out it wasn't an issue. I only saw the first name of the teacher, and it was a different teacher with the same first name, but it's
No, that's a good point.
it's confusing.
All right. That was it.
That's it. Are there questions for Mike? Okay, that brings us to Directors of Teaching and Learning, Rhonda and
So
Joy.
comprehensive, So Mike talked about quite a few things that are going on with us, but I think what I'd like to highlight is what is in our note for this month, and that's the long-awaited Friday Professional Development Day in responsive classroom and restorative practices. It was probably a year ago this time. We probably told you we announced that this was coming. And it's literally taken us a year to get here. And that's because it takes a long time to contract with organizations. We did try to set up the school year with success by working with our school coach and kind of opening our day with some basic tenets and beliefs to sort of preview, and our individual buildings sort of introduce some components of it. But we really haven't had a comprehensive training on what we're calling MTSS behavior until now. And I just want to speak about that concept about MTSS, because it's an edge-about jargon, right? And all we're looking for is supporting students, making sure they learn and grow academically and behaviorally. And to do that, instead of us working in isolation, all trying really hard, we've come up with a systematic approach, right, that allows us to be strategic so that we can be efficient, so that we can have better student outcomes, and then hopefully achieve a better work-life balance for our teachers, right? So that's what this is that umbrella is MTSS. And we haven't really come together and talked about behavior until now. And we have been talking to you about how we've noticed behaviors have changed, after COVID, lots of things are different. And really up until that point, we haven't worked together when it comes to supporting student behaviors in such a comprehensive way. What I mean by that is really lining up our philosophy, our language, our strategies, and really our underlying core values and beliefs are going to have to get exposed through this process. So we're starting on Friday. We're really excited about it. It's a responsive classroom is a program a lot of our teachers, I think we've got about 20 teachers who did the 4-day institute already throughout the district. So some schools are a little bit ahead with some teacher leaders in that realm, and actually they're going to do a deeper dive on Friday to responding misbehavior. So they're not going to repeat what they've already learned, they're going to get a differentiated experience and go a little deeper. But basically it's a research-based process that focuses on what works, and it starts with hopes and dreams, right? Tapping into kids' hopes and dreams, and then talking about how behaviors help them get to that end point, right? And then it kind of emphasizes the importance of positive reinforcement, that you don't wait for kids to screw up and then give them a reprimand. You work the room, you notice when they're doing things right, you're giving them positive affirmations. It's work to build a school culture. It's not passive. You have to be deliberate about it. So, getting that kind of mindset, it's different for a lot of us. And then, when things don't go well, right, to have logical consequences, fix it, break it, right? Maybe a loss of privilege for, a period of time. I mean, things that are logical, and you use mistakes as learning opportunities in teaching kids. So it's really a foundation to what we're going to be talking about restorative practices, that idea that when you have harm, you can be restored into the community, which tends to be more of a middle school, high school approach. But really they go hand in hand. And so Responsive Classroom is a K-8 program, but it supports restorative practices. Mike mentioned restorative practices, and some middle schools are bringing that into their work as well. Not everyone is. And that's just, we're just not there yet. So we're in different places, but it is something that the Anti-Racism Task Force has put forward years ago as a request. And the high school has, reignited their commitment to restorative practices after 2020, but it's not new to the high school. Actually, it was introduced my first year here, so that was 10, 11 years ago. The problem with, I think, our high school approach with restorative practices is we haven't really hit it as a system yet. I mean, we've tried, and it's been a lot of personality dependent, a lot of people who are championing the work dependent, but we haven't treated it like a comprehensive approach like we're trying to do with Responsive Classroom, and we're also now trying to do that with restorative practices. So building in systems that really, it shouldn't matter if you're on the board next year, it's going to carry on. It shouldn't matter if we're here, it's going to carry on. It shouldn't matter if our teacher leaders at the building switch around. It'll still go on. But we haven't quite got it to that place yet. So we're still in that early kind of training part, better understanding it, understanding core values and beliefs that hold up restorative practices. I think I'm talking a little bit in circles here, but I think you're getting the point, right? We're still early stages on restorative practices. And it's part of our plan to be a little better and strategic about all of this stuff. Mike hasn't mentioned this yet, so I'm going to get ahead of you. We're going to work on a 5-year plan when it comes to MTSS, academics and behavior. How are we going to, what do we want in 5 years, and then how are we going to build towards that? So it is a true comprehensive system, not personality dependent, superintendent dependent, and so forth. So that's our next step. That's summer work we're going to start working on. But in the meantime, we're still moving forward with this work. So any questions on Responsive Classroom or restorative practices?
I guess my only question is, I know you said that it's not all comprehensive and it's not like you don't have one game plan. Are you guys setting the agenda for each school building, or is the administrator per school building setting the agenda? Because I know it's a school-wide professional day.
We're all meeting here at the high
Okay.
school.
Okay.
We've contracted, we have a lot of facilitators coming, and they're gonna be groups of 30 who are gonna be getting the training. We have different programming for our ed techs. To be honest, it was very expensive, and we couldn't afford to have everybody participate in the responses for $30,000. ESSER money paid for it. And so what we did to kind of fill in that gap is we have 2 early releases, and we had Becky Lehman, she's our instructional coach, a little bit of a train-the-trainer model, where she's working with the ed techs on responsive classroom during the 2 early releases so that we can kind of scoop them into the culture piece, and then we'll continue to build with that format. And then the high school agenda is primarily organized by me in concert with the leadership at the building level. So we're gonna have a different program. So I'm gonna open the day. We have a lot of collaboration between the restorative practices team at the high school. They're gonna help with student-led presentations and some circle work that we're gonna do there. And in the afternoon, our school coach, Danielle Pierre, she's the one who is from the Great Schools Partnership, is going to do some MTSS behavior training, which is gonna connect to our high impact teaching framework. So it's connected to our supervision evaluation process, and it's gonna be how you respond in situations and strategies. So,
Thank you. That
you're
way,
welcome.
when people are like, oh, the parking lot of the school's emptied, I'm like, oh, well, they're at the high school.
Oh, sorry, you
business.
just wanted the quick answer, and I just gave it the long
No,
one.
that's okay. The detail is so good, but there's been multiple comments, been like, oh, professional
We'll all be
development,
here.
nobody's there.
Yes, we'll all be here. The Flex-It box lunches are here.
Any other questions for Rhonda or Julie? Okay, that brings us to our discussion item, which is the first reading of revisions to policy GCSA, which is about employee and independent contractor use of school-issued devices. And so we won't be voting on this. We worked on it in policy committee, and then we had some questions for this staff committee that had been working on this, so this one is still being worked on, but you could have a first look at the revisions to this policy, which deals with how what rules govern obviously employees and contractors using these any kind of devices, whether it's a laptop or a tablet or whatever, phone.
And so the tech team sort of worked on taking a look at the old policy and then taking a look at policies from other schools and putting together something that sort of defined sort of clearly our policies and identifying adding independent contractors, because oftentimes we provide devices for them in terms of the work that they do here in the schools, and setting some guiding principles in terms of what it means when you have a device, and what are the rules around that, and sort of clarifying in terms of instead of identifying computers, but talking about all devices, because we have more than just computers in our schools and devices that people use. So there is another set of policies that we're still working on, but this was the first one that they finished up. And the policy committee took a look at it. I don't know if there are any other questions from folks before it goes back there in terms of questions. And Lou is here, so he might be able to answer some questions.
I have a question. Computers have moved to just devices now?
Devices is supposedly, like what other school districts are using the word devices as is all encompassing anything that's electronic.
Yeah, I was just being a smart ass.
You can just use your device quietly over there.
Got a little sensitive.
That's your device. Maybe are you following the rules on your device? Any other? No. Okay. So, action item, first and final readings of revisions to policy ACAA, and second reading of GCF professional staff hiring. ACAA, people may remember, is a policy that we worked on extensively, and then after its, first months or nearly a year of use, there were just a few, and with some legal advice, minor adjustments, but we're doing a first and final so that we can keep it being our legal policy, and they're relatively minor adjustments. And then we're not reviewing ACAAR because after meeting with Rhonda and others and Ian and the attorneys, we realized this really was just a formatting issue, which isn't something we need to pass. We just needed to reformat it. So it will stay as is. Mike, you have more to add about ACAA?
As we were going through it, one of the things that council helped us understand and to try to help clarify is when you look on the back, it shows that sexual harassment under Maine law, we struck that language, particularly because it's really no different from federal law. And when you look at the circles, it sort of helps to identify that, that those Title IX regulations are pretty much the core of when it comes to this document. But what the board was really trying to, what you all were really trying to say in the policy committee is that there are certain behaviors under board policy that are really important. We need to make sure that people understand are not okay. And so, we wanted to try to make it less confusing and understand that there is this prohibition on sexual harassment and discrimination, and there's a federal, and then the board policy is a little more expansive in terms of making sure that people understand what's good behavior in schools. And so those changes, when we worked with Drummond Woodson, were the ones that they suggested to make it a little bit cleaner and simpler to understand. And then, as Jessica had said, the ACAAR, when looking at it, it seems to be more of a formatting problem to make it easier for people who are looking at it understand what sections they need to go to in terms of procedures if there is a question. And that would make Ian's job a little bit easier, and Rhonda's job, and the student or the staff member who's looking at that document to figure out what's going on or what they need to do if they need to bring something forward.
I'd say our goal is that we want the policy has to conform to the law, of course, right? But also, we want it to be as simple as possible while also containing what's legally required and as accessible to students and their families as possible. Go ahead.
You can get a motion before
Yeah.
discussion. Okay, so I'll move acceptance of policy ACAA, harassment, discrimination, and sexual harassment of students.
Is there a second? Tyson? Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, very good. Did you get that, Selena? Yeah, okay. So the second one is professional staff hiring.
And I think we had looked at this is the second reading, and there were just some suggested changes from MSMA in terms of this policy and sort of clarifying some of the rules and procedures and basic guidelines to follow, just to make it clearer for administrators.
Great. All right, I move acceptance of policy GCF, professional staff hiring.
Is there a second? Tyson, okay. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
I'll just sort of share in terms of policies. Marie sort of showed up for the ACAA discussion, and for policy, if you when the agenda goes out and there's something that you're interested in, for policy committee, you don't have to join it wholeheartedly, though that would be nice to have more people. But if there's something that interests you that you're passionate about and you want to share, you can show up for those meetings to be a part of those discussions. So please, when those agendas go out and you see what we're talking about, and if you want to show up, please come and do that for those particular ones, though we do enjoy you all.
Anyone? It's always the last Thursday of the month, and Selena sends out the agendas. Hopefully everyone sees them in their emails. So, okay, is that it for action items? Is there other business? I know that I've sent out emails about the after-school committee and the calendar committee. Those will be getting going, so we will have reports from those in some maybe May meeting. Any other business? Okay, future agenda items.
There'll be, I think we'll do a little bit more. I think at one of our other board members in Bar Harbor, there was a public comment about instructional minutes. And so I went to the Bar Harbor board, but I thought it would be something really important for the AOS board as a whole to sort of look at rather than each individual school. And so we'll be presenting a little bit something of that in terms of all of our schools and what that looks like. I think there's a bill in the legislature about increasing that. So it would be a good time to sort of see how that plays out in all of our schools. So we'll be doing that in April.
I'm after that conversation, I know you had to leave a little bit early, so I don't know if you heard the last piece of it or if you read Heather's excellent notes. But one of the things that I raised and that we kind of came to think about was the idea that maybe based on the comments that we've heard over the last couple of years that seem to come forward at calendar time, that seem to come forward that were spurred with the high school starting later. And I think now that is coming out with individual minutes per day. The sort of the flavor of a lot of those comments is really questioning potentially the piecemeal way that we sometimes may be making decisions about what the educational day looks like. And sometimes what I would consider, by no fault of ours, sometimes reactionary way that we make decisions maybe about busing or about when the school day should start, and also related to things that we don't have control over, that we have to implement, that are professional development days and increased minutes for planning that's based on the contract. So my wonder is simply having a conversation about instructional minutes and how that may or may not work here based on how it may or may not work in other places might not be like the most fruitful discussion that we could and should have about the educational drivers that we as a board and we as a community really care about, that should be driving the calendar, that should be driving the transportation, that should be driving what the number of hours that a student might be in school in the day, regardless if it's academic time or just being there to get lunch or breakfast or an after school snack or to be with their peers. So I would just ask for us to consider, Mike, add to your plate. Is there a bigger conversation that we should be having so that we are not continuously reactionary to these things that come forward to us, starting with, now that we're sort of through COVID, that we can really look at, this is what we think an educational day, week, year, calendar, philosophy should look like. This is what a day should look like. This is what a week should look like. And then we can build out, as I was kind of chatting with Jessica about it, building out from there, rather than where we usually are, is we're reacting and we're making a policy change or making a calendar change or making a half-day change, or we're reacting, I would say, from the bottom down rather than the bottom up, rather than the top.
The wrong cart is driving the horse. The car is driving the
I
horse.
think that's an important conversation that we should have.
The way I'm seeing it based on our conversation is that I think we should have a specific conversation, because this is a piece of this, is like how much, which you alluded to, how much minutes should, like, what is our value on time? I don't like the word seat time, or they're not sitting in seats, but whatever. Like, do we have a value around what do we think about that? Like about, should there be minutes in school or hours or days or whatever? And then, but then the second bigger piece is, and I think we do this, but going back, just like we do with the the standards, or like we did with the like the yardstick, just making sure that we have a process so that whether we're talking about the calendar or transportation, that we have a way to double check that the driver is what's in the best interest of students. Not like, what do teachers like, or what's convenient on the bus schedule, or whatever, but
What's the
that
workday like for
or
parents?
whatever, that we have that we have some kind of measuring tool to make sure that we're having that fidelity. I think that would be the two items. Does that make sense? Okay, and of course, we'll have our usual agenda items of reports and updates and budget updates and policy updates and all that. Okay. Is there any other agenda items? Okay, next, is there any more public comment? I'm forgetting the public today, I'm sorry.
Nothing, Nancy?
Okay, the next meeting is Monday, 8th of April at 2024 at probably 6 o'clock, but follow your email. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, second. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed?
I'm abstaining.
Anyone abstaining? Do you have pecuniary interest?
Thank you, everyone.